What's up guys, welcome back to Phil Always Wins. Today we are going to be breaking down the full card of UFC Fight Night, Ankalaev taking on Guskov. Now I did get a new painting of Ilia Topuria and I would like you guys to rate it out of 10. I don't have anywhere to put it right now, but in future videos you will be seeing this as a backdrop in my videos. Anyways, let's get straight back to business. To kick off the night, we have a fight between Abdul Hussein and Cody Gibson, where I'm favoring Abdul to win this fight because I simply think that he's the fresher fighter with a lot more finishing upside at this stage in his career. You know, Cody Gibson, he's coming off back-to-back losses where he got finished in both of those fights, and he's already lost 4 of his 6 UFC fights. He got brutally knocked out in his last fight, and at the age of 38, it's hard to bounce back from a loss that heavy, especially against someone that's 10 years younger than you. Abdul is making his UFC debut this Saturday, and I just think that he's the more motivated fighter that's going to want to put on a good performance, especially for his first fight in the UFC. The main problem for Cody is that he doesn't really shine anywhere, and you know, he isn't the greatest wrestler, he doesn't have much power on the feet, and his only real advantage in this fight is his height and reach advantage. Given that Abdul is pretty short for the division, standing at 5'5", I think he's going to try and shoot for some takedowns for the sake of closing the distance, and I reckon that he'll be able to find a submission in round 2 once he gets this fight to the ground. Next up, we have a pretty fun fight in the lightweight division between Nurullo Aliev taking on Mike Davis, where I think that Aliev is going to get the win. Both of these fighters are wrestlers, but Aliev is just the more effective wrestler. His biggest strength is that he can push a heavy wrestling pace without slowing down for all 3 rounds. He's constantly looking to close the distance and get his hands locked, and once he secures the takedown, his opponents almost never get back to their feet. The only thing that I dislike about Aliev is that he doesn't really threaten any submissions, and he usually racks up control time and wins a unanimous decision. But I will say that he did find a lot of success with his striking in his last fight against Shamrock, which was quite refreshing, but then again, Shamrock isn't the best UFC fighter. I do think that the majority of this fight will play out on the ground, and Davis can be dangerous there because he threatens a lot of submissions, but I just don't think that he'll be able to keep up with the same wrestling pace as Aliev. In Davis's last fight against Mitch Ramirez, he secured a takedown and controlled him on the ground for the whole of round 1, but coming into round 2, he seemed to be too tired to wrestle, and that's why he decided to stand and strike until he found the knockout. I think that that's a major red flag because he was in a dominant wrestling position, yet he still gassed out, so imagine if the roles were reversed. So I reckon that Aliev will be able to constantly take him down, tire him out, and control him for all 3 rounds until he wins a unanimous decision. Next up, we have a light heavyweight fight between Magomed Tuchalov taking on Brendson Ribeiro, where I think that Tuchalov is going to get the win. Tuchalov is one of those classic Russian fighters that are dangerous both on the feet and on the ground, and I just don't see him losing this fight. Wherever this fight takes place, he has the advantage, but a smart approach to this fight would be to try and take Ribeiro down, because Ribeiro is primarily a striker that seems to struggle when his opponents have the ability to wrestle. When Ribeiro does get taken down, it either leads to a ground and pound TKO loss or a submission loss, and it would be a great debut for Tuchalov if he can find a finish. Now, I don't think that Ribeiro is the worst UFC fighter, but he's currently on a 3-fight losing streak with all of them coming by way of finish, and he's only won 2 of his 7 UFC fights. It's hard to back a fighter that's on a losing streak because you have to question how much it's affecting the fighter's mentality, and I just think that Ribeiro isn't as confident in himself as he used to be. So I reckon that Tuchalov is going to strike with him for a little bit, maybe about 30 seconds, before taking him down and start exploding with his ground and pound until he finds a TKO win in round 1. Next up, we have a lightweight fight between Alex Sola and Ismael Bonfim, where I think that Alex Sola is going to get the win. The reason I'm favoring Sola to win this fight is because I expect both guys to be trading heavy shots on the feet, and I like that Sola has already proven that he can fight a technical brawl for all 3 rounds, like he did in his last fight against Mason Jones. Sola doesn't have much power in his hands, but he does a good job of breaking his opponents down with his constant pressure and volume strikes. And that's the perfect way to beat Bonfim, because Bonfim tends to start off his fights very aggressively, but then he slows down tremendously from midway of round 2 and onwards. We saw that happen in his last fight against Chris Padilla, where he gassed out and sort of just laid there and gave up, and he curled up in a ball and accepted a TKO loss in round 2. And Sola's a very tiring fighter to deal with because he does a good job of fighting from within the clinch, where he lands heavy knees to the body and also threatens takedowns. I think that constant pressure is going to tire Bonfim out heavily, and the longer this fight goes, the more it favors Sola. Now, Bonfim can be dangerous in round 1 because he does have power in his hands, and once again, he is very aggressive in round 1. But Sola has shown that he can fight a messy fight, and even if he gets hurt in round 1, I trust that he'll be able to survive and slowly break Bonfim down before finding a knockout in round 3. Next up, we have a welterweight fight between Santiago, Ponzinibbio, and Sam Peterson, where I think that Sam Peterson's gonna get the win. This is a perfect opportunity for Patterson to get right back into the winning column, following one of the most boring UFC fights where he did absolutely nothing the whole fight and lost a unanimous decision to MVP. Despite that poor performance, Patterson is currently in his prime at only 30 years old, and he's already got 4 wins in the UFC, with all of them coming by way of finish in round 1. He's one of the tallest fighters in the welterweight division, and he uses his reach advantage to land stiff jabs to control the distance until he finds an opportunity to land that right hand. He's mainly a striker that prefers to stand and pick his shots from the outside, but I like that he's able to mix in the takedowns from clinching positions and threaten submissions once he gets the fight to the ground. But there is one major red flag that I see in Patterson's game. A common problem with all tall fighters like Patterson is that they don't move their head all too much, and I worry that Santiago could land something big at any given moment. Santiago usually throws powerful looping overhands, but if he's smart, he'd try to land some straight shots down the middle, because Patterson tends to move back in a straight line. Santiago is also a highly experienced veteran that's been fighting in the UFC since 2013, and he even has a win over Sean Strickland, so he could make this fight competitive early on in the fight. But you have to question his durability at 39 years old, because he's been getting hurt badly in his recent fights, even the ones that he ends up winning. And so I just think that they're both in different stages of their careers right now, where Patterson is the hungrier and more dangerous finisher, and I reckon he'll be able to find a finish in round 1. Next up, we have a light heavyweight bout between Dustin Jacoby and Said Muhammad, where I'm taking Jacoby to get the win. When I initially picked Jacoby to win, I thought that he was going to be an underdog pick, but he actually opened as a favorite on the money line, and I don't usually like backing Jacoby because he's already old and can't really take a punch. But the reason I am backing him is because Muhammad Said is making his UFC debut on only 6 days notice. There isn't much about Said that really impresses me, because although he has 5 knockouts on his record, he's been fighting very low competition. He does the same striking combinations every fight, and I think it's only a matter of time before Jacoby can use his experience to make reads and adjustments mid-fight and land some nasty counter shots. Jacoby only has 4 losses in the UFC, with all of them coming to decent opponents like Dominic Reyes, Khalil Rountree, and Alonzo Minifield, and I just don't think that Said is on that level yet. Said's biggest advantage is obviously his youth and agility, but I don't think it's going to be enough, and I reckon that Jacoby is going to piece this prospect up and find a knockout in round 2. Next up, we have a very fun heavyweight fight between Valter Walker and Thomas the Train Peterson, where I think that Walker is going to get the win. Walker is famously known for locking up heel hooks, and that's his signature move because he's already got 4 wins in the UFC, all of them coming by way of heel hook submission in round 1. He's primarily a grappler, and despite his size, he's surprisingly quick and fluid on the ground. He's able to transition from side control to full mount to then threatening a submission, and you wouldn't expect someone as big as Walker to be able to move that swiftly and easily on the ground. But there is a downside to his game plan, because wrestling for 15 minutes can be very tiring, especially for a heavyweight, and we saw Walker gas out badly in his only UFC fight that went the full distance. Now, Thomas the Train is also a wrestler, and we've seen more of his stand-up striking capabilities compared to Walker. Walker rarely spends time striking because he's usually looking to get the fight to the ground right away, and that is a little bit of a concern because his striking is quite unknown. Thomas also has underrated power, and I like that he doesn't just rely on taking his opponents down to win fights. He does a good job of mixing in the takedowns and letting that takedown threat help him land big shots on the feet. And so Thomas may be able to defend the takedowns, keep this fight standing, and maybe piece Walker up on the feet. But at the end of the day, I think that Walker's aggressive style is going to win him this fight. He's the bigger fighter in this matchup, and I like that he just comes out shooting for a takedown, and I reckon he'll get it quite easily and find a submission in round 1. Next up, we have a fight between Abubakar and Saygid, where I think that Abubakar is going to get the win. Saygid is primarily a wrestler who usually gets his wins by either controlling his opponents on the ground for the majority of the fight until he gets a decision or he finds a submission. He's already got 13 submission wins on his record, so the game plan is quite obvious, and he's going to try and get this fight to the ground as soon as possible, because that's where Saygid fights his best fight. But he's a very one-dimensional fighter, and he relies completely on his wrestling and ground game to win fights, and it worries me because he couldn't even dominantly out-wrestle a 40-year-old Nicholas Dalby in his last fight. Despite struggling to secure takedowns, Saygid still refused to stand and strike, and that tells me one of two things. Either he isn't confident in his striking capabilities, or he doesn't have the best fight IQ. Now, Abubakar has some decent wrestling himself, and I think that he'll be able to stuff the takedowns and keep this fight standing. He's just the more well-rounded fighter who's confident in his wrestling and in his striking, and I reckon that he's going to land the more damaging shots over 15 minutes until he wins a unanimous decision. And just like that, we are on the main card of the evening where we have a heavyweight bout between Tyrell Fortune and Rizvan Kuniev, where initially I was taking Kuniev to win, but I think that I'm going to take a shot on Tyrell Fortune to get the win. Now, a little disclaimer, I did end up switching my pick to Tyrell Fortune after recording, but enjoy the rest of this video. Kuniev is currently a minus 333 favorite on the money line, but I actually think that they're equally matched and that this fight is closer than the odds suggest. Fortune is a very talented wrestler that's able to mix in the takedowns and offensive striking, but I think that Kuniev's takedown defense is solid enough to keep the majority of this fight standing. Kuniev has power in his shots and he's also got very quick hands, but the thing that I don't like about him is that he doesn't produce enough output on the feet because he's more of a counter striker. What that means is that he waits for his opponents to throw something first, and then he tries to use his speed advantage to land a counter shot. The problem with waiting to land a counter shot is that it gives Fortune the opportunity to make the first move, and he may fake a punch and shoot for a takedown instead. Tyrell Fortune's striking also looked pretty slick in his last fight, which was his debut fight against Tybura, who isn't an easy opponent to deal with, and I actually cashed on him as an underdog for that fight. But I still think that Kuniev has an advantage on the feet, and I reckon that he'll be able to defend the takedowns and win in the striking exchanges until he wins a unanimous decision. Next up, we have a lightweight fight between Magomed Zaynukov taking on Damian Rezpecki, where I think that Zaynukov is going to get the win. Magomed, or more famously known as John Pork, is finally making his UFC debut this Saturday, and there's been a lot of hype behind his name because he trains in Khabib's camp with the current champ Islam Makhachev. Obviously, he's surrounded by wrestlers and he does have the capability to wrestle, but he's more of a striker than a wrestler. I believe his background is Muay Thai, and I like that he's a calm and composed striker that doesn't overextend or fall out of position when he throws his combinations, which allow him to stay defensively responsible while still applying pressure. I'm not sure why, but a lot of fighters from Khabib's camp have this ability to recover quickly after being hurt badly, and we saw that happen in his fight against Lucas Caldas in the Contender Series, so I really do trust his durability and fighting spirit to keep him in this fight. Now, Damian isn't the worst fighter, but I do think that he'll get finished in this fight. He's currently undefeated at 10-0 with 9 of his wins coming by way of finish. He's a very disciplined striker who doesn't fight like someone who's trying to force big moments, and he does a good job of staying in position after he throws, quite like John Pork, which makes it very difficult to land counter shots on him because he isn't constantly overreaching or leaving himself badly exposed. But then again, we've never seen Damian face adversity because he's always fighting low-level opponents, and I think that John Pork is going to constantly land clean combinations and overwhelm him until he finds a knockout in round 2. Next up, we have a welterweight fight between Islam Dulatov and Wellington Turman, where I think that Turman should just go straight back into retirement and call it a career. The main reason that I'm backing Dulatov is because Turman hasn't fought since 2023, and he didn't even have the best record, losing 5 of his 8 UFC fights, and he was also on a 3-fight losing streak before he decided to stop fighting. On the other hand, we have a hungry German prospect who's knocking everybody out in round 1, and this feels like a setup from the UFC for another round 1 knockout highlight reel. Turman is primarily a grappler whose game plan is to get this fight to the ground as soon as possible and try to find a submission, but I don't think he'll even be able to land 1 takedown. Not only does Dulatov have good ground game himself, but his size makes him very hard to take down, and if he can keep this fight standing, then I am 100% sure that he'll find a knockout, and it's just a matter of which round he'll find the knockout in. On the feet, he's got the reach advantage, and he likes to hop back and forth before blitzing you with his combinations, which are very quick and powerful, and it almost always leads to him getting a finish. I just don't see Turman beating a prospect of this size, especially since he's been out for 3 years, and I reckon that he'll get knocked out in round 1. And just like that, we are on the co-main event of the evening where we have Steve Erceg taking on Ramazan Temirov, where I'm taking the underdog Urseg to get the win. Urseg is one of the most well-rounded fighters in the flyweight division that's really only lost to talented fighters like Pantoja, Moreno, and Kai Kara-France, but there's one major concern about him. We've seen Urseg get hurt badly in a lot of his fights, even the ones that he's won, and Ramazan is known for having dangerous power, especially early on in the fight. Ramazan starts off every fight with a lot of aggression by swinging overhands, and nothing really stops him from coming forward, which is why most of his knockouts have come in round 1. But a major problem for Ramazan is that he's unable to maintain that high pace for all 3 rounds, and the longer this fight goes, the more he slows down and loses power in his shots. And so if this fight does go past round 1, I think that Urseg will start to take over because he's a highly experienced fighter with slick boxing. He's more of a volume striker rather than a power puncher, and he relies more on slowly breaking his opponents down rather than landing that one knockout shot. Also, Ramazan was caught using steroids in his fight against Charles Johnson, where he seemed to gas out in round 2 and round 3, and now he's coming into this fight without steroids, and I just don't know if his gas tank is going to hold up. So I do think that Ramazan's aggression will let him find early success in the fight, maybe even hurt Urseg, but I trust Urseg's experience to survive the first round and start piecing him up on the feet from round 2 and onwards, and win a 29-28 unanimous decision. And just like that, we're on the main event of the evening, where we have Magomed Ankalaev taking on Bogdan Guskov, where I think that Ankalaev is going to get the win. Personally, I'm not betting on this fight because Guskov is still a dangerous opponent, and Ankalaev is times 1.1 on the money line. But to be fair, Ankalaev has got every advantage coming into this fight. Initially, he was set to fight Khalil Roundtree, but he pulled out due to injury a week before the event, and so Guskov stepped in on short notice. Guskov was supposed to fight the following week in a rematch fight between Jan Blachowicz, so he has been in training camp, but now he's set to fight a fighter with a completely different fighting style in a completely different country. He was also preparing to fight a 3-round fight, whereas now he has to fight a 5-round fight, so I'm not sure that Guskov is physically prepared to go all 5 rounds. But I still wouldn't consider Ankalaev a lock because he's more of a points fighter than a knockout artist, and that gives Guskov's 5 rounds to try and find a knockout shot. But I like that Ankalaev took 9 months off to physically and mentally recover from his knockout loss to Alex Pereira, and I think he's going to be hungrier than ever to get right back into the winning column. And so I reckon that Ankalaev is going to fight a very smart fight, maybe a similar fight that he fought against Alex Pereira in their first outing, where he fought most of the fight in the clinch due to the power threat. I think he'll control the fight in the clinch, land some damaging shots when they break, and then go straight back to the clinch and win a unanimous decision. And so that's going to do it for my full card breakdown of UFC Fight Night Ankalaev taking on Guskov. Let me know in the comments what you guys think, and don't forget to follow me on Instagram to be the first to know about my weekly UFC betting tips. Peace.